Joining us now is Brandon Arnold, the Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union. Of course, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I want to start with this report that just came out from the San Francisco Fed. It found that corporate price gouging was not a prime driver of rise in inflation in 2021 and 2022. Now, here's a portion of what was said. Analysis suggests that fluctuations in price markups were not a main driver of the post-pandemic surge in inflation, nor of the recent disinflation that started in mid-2022. Of course, when we talk about markups, we're talking about the difference between selling price and also the cost to make it here. Now, they found that markups rose. They are admitting that in different sectors like the auto industry, but was not the main driver here of inflation. So what does this tell us as consumers? Are companies off the hook here?
I mean, I think largely, yes. The data shows that, they're not marking up prices at a rate that was higher than pre-pandemic. So corporations are largely not to blame with this runaway inflation. That doesn't mean that they're off the hook in terms of rhetorics. We're certainly going to get a lot of politicians on the left. Joe Biden has made this one of the centerpieces of his recent campaign speech, that corporations are driving inflation, that they're the boogeyman, that they are these evil entities that are making everything more expensive. Of course, that's not true based on this report. There are a lot of other factors in play, including a lot of the policies that Biden himself have enacted.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is obviously becoming a political issue, dividing the parties here. You have some progressive groups like the Groundwork Collaborative think tank. They had their own report that they said 53% of inflation during the last quarter accounted for companies and, of course, the prices. They say companies are keeping the prices high even as inflationary costs go down. Something the Biden administration has said as well. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, not to beat up on this report, but I think they really misinterpret a lot of economic data. Just one case in point to that. They look at the increase in consumer prices relative to producer prices and say because there's a gap there, that it must be firms that are responsible, companies that are responsible for this increase in inflation, when the truth is that same phenomenon exists before the pandemic and when inflation was at 1.4%. So obviously there's a lot more going on. I think they're missing the big picture here. And the San Francisco Fed report is a lot more accurate when it comes to painting this inflation picture.
But listen, greed is a thing. In fact, we have a term for it. It's being called greedflation. That's something that is being pushed by the Biden administration. How do you define that?
Well, greedflation is this notion that because the economy is in such turmoil right now, because in this post-pandemic period, that corporations are swooping in and taking advantage of American consumers by raising prices, by shrinking package sizes, and so forth. It's just that the economic data doesn't support that. Of course, there's a lot of frustration out there from Americans, and it's always easy to point to corporations because they are large and because they do wield significant power in this economy. But the truth is, they're also very much beholden to consumer demand. Consumer demand has been sky high since the pandemic, since we started injecting trillions and trillions of dollars into this economy through bad fiscal and monetary policy. That is one of the reasons why our inflation rate in the United States is higher than that of China, of Japan, of Europe, of Canada. We have a very high inflation rate here, and a lot of it is because of really bad fiscal policies.
How do you square that when people at home, they buy a bag of chips and they look in that bag and there are fewer chips in the bag, shrinkflation? How do you square that for people at home when they see these record profits and they see less food in these bags and they're wondering, are they getting played here? Are they losing out?
No, I mean, the fact is everything has gotten more expensive, not just for consumers, but for producers as well. Because to make those chips, guess what? Labor costs are higher because of regulations, because of broad economic trends. Energy costs are higher. Real estate costs are higher. Virtually everything is more expensive. So if everything gets more expensive, that pushes prices up. And when you have high consumer demand, which we've had, it's been kind of a bizarre phenomenon. The consumer demand has been so high throughout the pandemic. That's what's driven prices and reduced those portion sizes. Unfortunately, what we're starting to see is consumer demand falling. We're starting to see retailers report more just concerning earnings reports. And I think the positive side of that is that could lower inflation. The downside of that is that 2/3 of our economy is based on consumer spending, and that could signify an economic downturn.
All right. Thank you so much, Brandon. Of course, thank you again. He's Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayer Union. Take care. See you later.